Anjaria continues to discover new combination and configurations in these contemporary writings. She tells us that what Bhagat writes is a new provincialism. What does she mean by this? She says that it's in deliberate opposition to the older cosmopolitan ethos of Rushdie or a Ghosh. What do I mean by this? What does she mean by this idea of older cosmopolitan ethos of Rushdie or Ghosh? If you remember Rushdie's essay that we dealt with, where Rushdie tells us that that the Indian English writer is no more only a writer of the ghetto in that sense. He or she is a global writer who draws from the globe, draws across and lives across the world. We are translated men, is what he said, in a sense, talking about this idea of cosmopolitanism, where writers are constantly migrating, writers are constantly moving across the globe, writers are constantly looking for new avenues and new experiences, and they are part and result of these kinds of migrational experiences. And he gives his own example. He talks about how in his younger days he remembers the older Bombay and how it had become now, and he goes on to contrast that idea, and then he thinks constantly about the past and how past is not a foreign country, past is somewhere he keeps going back to, and how past colors his present, in a sense talking about nostalgia and loss. However, what the narrative also in that essay continuously harps on is the idea that the Indian English writer is a global citizen, is not only rooted in a certain kind of a provincial space, that they are not only tethered to that reality, tethered to India. They can be anywhere in the world, but then they are thinking about the place that they have left behind. Very true when we look at, for example, someone like Mistry, who was writing about Firozshabad, sitting in Canada, reminiscing about a way of life, about again the chutnification of English, where you see how the Goan lady, who's a house help in a Parsi household, mixes many languages in English itself. So you have many of these interventions that happen, and then that kind of gives us a picture of the writer who is able to traverse and travel across many cultures, and thanks to English they are able to provide us that experience. Similar is the case of Lahiri, who, according to her own admission, did not have access to many of the Indian experiences, but for her parents. You see in Mr. Pizzada Comes to Dine how she characterizes and represents this kind of a cosmopolitan ethos. We are told that the girl, the young girl, has does not know much about India, and the father is frustrated about that part of the history, has to tell her what is the subcontinent like, who are India's neighbors, and then gradually she develops a sense of it. And then we are told about the cosmopolitan world order, about this family, Indian family, who is now living and settled abroad in a university town, and where their world is constantly intersected by the subcontinent far away in the US. So you have constant like movement between time zones, between spaces, from Bangladesh to Kolkata to US. So there is a certain kind of a cosmopolitan ethos that no matter whatever happens, people are able to overcome, and they are able to settle down somewhere else. Then they are able to create a home there, even if they feel the nostalgia, even if they feel the loss of it in that in that space, the domestic space of the university town, this household, this Bengali household has been able to bring out an hyphenated identity, which is an Indian American identity, and therefore you see the kid who is not going to be just an Indian or an American, will be an Indian American, because she starts feeling a kind of a camaraderie and a solidarity for Mr. Pirzada's family. Also, while engaging in cultural activities that are very peculiar and particular to US, she is able to find time for prayers and acts of belonging and solidarity towards a Bangladeshi compatriot, towards a larger subcontinental imagination. So what you had in these kinds of writings is about that migration towards the West, and subjectivity which is born out of this migrational activity, migration which resulted in a cosmopolitan ethos, that we go beyond the nation itself. The nation is only a geographical marker. We are talking about larger, effective and humane bonds in that sense. What Anjaria argues here is that we see a new kind of provincialism in Bhagat. If you look at any of Bhagat's novel, it's unashamedly rooted in India. It's unashamedly rooted in not the major centers of action as it was in the earlier novels coming out from India. And that's why she says the new provincialism locates the futurity in India itself. None of these people are migrating anywhere abroad and reminiscing from there about what was their houses and homes look like, what were the rituals look like, what were the food smelt like. None of these take place. So therefore, the timeline and the timeline of the novel is entirely located in India, and to explain this idea of provincialism that is locates futurity in India, I'll again go back to Mr. Pirzada, and if you remember, the story begins retrospectively, that the narrator says that it was in the 1970s that I'm thinking. So the futurity is already located in US, the current time, the future of 1970s, right? So from the current time, the narrator looks at 1970s in a backward glance. So the futurity is already established abroad in that sense. The futurity is already established abroad, not in India, not in Bangladesh itself. So unlike that, the new provincialism locates futurity in India rather than in the West, and specifically in India's tier 2 cities. So in a sense, we are looking at a certain democratic impulse of Indian writing in English, that it opens up to India's tier 2 cities, a movement that is also can be seen in Indian movies also, where you see a certain kind of a movement towards representations of the Hindi heartland, of tier 2 cities, of struggles of everyday struggles of people from these non-metropolitan centers of India. And she says that it can be populist, but it is also practical. You see many practical negotiations that happen. So it will be populist, it will be practical, it will imagining politics not in ideal terms, where cosmopolitan ethos and a certain kind of a secularist idea of progressive politics is imagined, and there is a certain kind of a way that other kind of politics is looked down upon. She says that unashamedly these contemporary writings are populist. They are engaged in practical imaginations of politics itself, not in ideal terms, but as a pragmatic way of changing certain aspects of India so that livable lives can be found not only in abroad but in India as well. So that that what these novels are undertaking, or what these representations are undertaking, is a radical change, that they are locating the futurity in India. They are challenging, but not like destabilizing, or not in terms of the way that we thought that these were challenges. And that is more important, that what they are changing are not only themes or contents of the novel, but they are challenging the way that we thought what was considered to be subversive. So they engage in a much more pragmatic rather than an idealist politics. And what Anjaria argues is that when you become that, when you engage in that pragmatic politics, it will be that some part of it will be populist. So some of it will be stereotypical representations. Some of it will also cave into certain kind of ideological push itself. So, but what they do as an important thing is that they change certain aspects of India so that livable lives, that the aspiration itself is to be found in India itself. That like the aspiration of these tier 2 cities, or the young men and women from these places, the aspiration then is not located entirely abroad, that like, oh, only when I go there then can I live my life what I wanted to, or in a society that I wanted to. So you see many kinds of subversion. So for example, in Anuja Chauhan, we'll see a very interesting commentary on gender politics itself, or also on the state of media itself, or in the sense of government's control over media itself. There are interesting commentaries which can be very radical, but they are couched in this populist idiom itself, which does not make them look threatening. So, so what by that what they are doing is like, for a novel like those Pricey Thakur girls, it pushes the conversation towards a bit more equal space, towards a bit more progressive space for gender equations, and but while doing so, it falls into many stereotypes. It benefits from many stereotypes. It participates in male gaze and other kind of what would be considered as regressive politics. So therefore, Anuja Chauhan and Ulka Anjaria argue that we need to focus on what are the new combinations that are coming out, rather than just dismissing it wholeheartedly, summarily, without even having a look at it. And those are the final words of Anjaria in this essay also, that there is a certain kind of a ideological heterogeneity rather than coherence is what you will see. You will see a ideological heterogeneity. What you will also see is a much more individualistic politics. It's much more individualistic. You may call it also even selfish. You may call it egocentric. One can also think that these are not anymore the older kind of politics that to be seen in the earlier writings, where the individual stood in for the community. Here you see very different kinds of negotiations. As she will argue, they are set in the present, they are not handcuffed to history. Unlike any of the older works which were handcuffed to history, that the narrative was in some way representing something that was happening in the history itself, something that was tied to the history of the nation. She gives the example of Raj Rao's novel, which is about gay desire in India. And she concludes, in both The Walk Through Mahim and this imaginary picture of Milind in khaki shorts, the question of chauvinism gets subsumed into UD's emotional sexual feelings mingled with his desire for Milind. Milind's body becomes the focus of both scenes, overshadowing the liberal secular feeling of fear or outrage at communal violence and the damage it does to India's secular fabric, as seen in a novel like Amitav Ghosh's Shadowline. So personal desire becomes an important theme here, and it does not link itself to communal violence, which are also there, or how it is damaging India's secular fabric, which was a concern in Ghosh's shadow lines, which how it kind of interlinked itself or enmeshed itself to India's history. Unlike that, Raj Rao's novel, she articulates, is like profoundly contemporary because it is not handcuffed to history. They are light, they have a wider readership than Indian English novel had in 1980s and 90s. They are set among middle class. They can be fun to read. They often do not open themselves to deep analysis or universal themes, and they cannot be reduced to progressive politics, but nor are entirely product of capitalism. So this kind of either ors or the opposite ends of the spectrum, looking at binary ideals of popular versus canonical, high versus low, serious versus trivial, those binaries are subverted, and therefore they merit a closer look at it. And for that, we have a novel with us written by a writer called Anuja Chauhan. The novel's name is Those Pricey Thakur Girls. Now, Anuja Chauhan is an Indian novelist as well as a screenwriter. She has written many novels. The first one being the Zoya Factor, which was also made into a movie. Then afterwards, she went on to write many other works: Battle for Bitora, Those Pricey Thakur Girls, The House That BJ Built, Bars, Club You to Death, and the latest being The Fast and the Dead. Chauhan has had a very long career in advertising, known for many catchy and powerful, impactful, creative advertising stories, advertising campaigns, and her work is quite interesting, and therefore I have chosen Those Pricey Thakur Girls as a case study to think about the contemporary as was explained by Ulka Anjaria. The story is modeled on Austen's Pride and Prejudice. As you will remember, Austen's story was about 5 daughters. This one is also about 5 daughters. The patriarch is Justice Ellen Thakur and his wife Mamta. They have named their 5 daughters alphabetically: Anjini, Binodini, Chandralekha, Devjani, Ishwari. The 4th daughter, Devjani, is the protagonist of the story. Each daughter has their own quirks and ambition. Together they represent the changing face of Indian middle class, and it's set up around the 1990s on the eve of the 92 reforms and opening up of the economy and the society of India. The story centers Devjani, who's a news reader on Desh Darpan, the television network, the sole television network of India at that point of time, India's national television network. She is idealistic, she is honest, and she is very beautiful. That's what Chauhan keeps again and again reminding us. She goes on to make a very good news reader on DD. At the same time, we are also introduced to the other character called Dylan Singh Shekhawat, who's a investigating journalism. He's sharp, he's handsome, he's cynical. He is investigating a serious case that is of 1984 riots in Delhi. The novel is set up in Delhi. Devjani and Dylan initially clash, much like Pride and Prejudice, the characters there, Elizabeth and Darcy. He sees her as privileged and naive. She sees she thinks of him as arrogant and being righteous, and also finds him infuriating. However, as the framework of Pride and Prejudice goes, they keep running into each other. They have misunderstandings, but they keep falling for each other, and finally at the end of the novel, all misunderstandings are resolved, and they get together. Interesting as it is, the framework of Pride and Prejudice almost ends there. As I said, the love affair takes on the backdrop of 1984 riots. So as you can see, we were talking about the heterogeneity of discourses. There are many heterogeneous discourses already coming out. One is the discourse of adaptation. That the adaptation of the English genre of novel, right? Remember when we started, we were talking about how the novel form was adapted in India and everything, and how Bankim was adapting it when we were talking about Rajmohan's wife. And we seem to have come a full circle, and therefore one of the reasons of also choosing the novel for as the last text for this course was also to look at that development, that whereas Bankim was trying to take inspiration from various Victorian writings, you have here a contemporary writer who goes back to a classic, Western classic, and remakes it in India, adapts it to 1990s Delhi. And the adaptation is very interesting because the frame is same, but unlike what Austen's fiction is pejoratively known as domestic fiction, because it was thought of as only taking place in a very restricted, circumscribed space, which was not in any way affecting the nation or larger discourses. Obviously, Edward Said reads one of his famous, one of Austen's famous works to show us how Austen's work was intricately related to the history of colonialism and everything. But typically, conventionally, Austen has been read as domestic fiction because her space of action is very limited, and the themes are also restricted, and the characters seem to have very limited interest, and the interests seem to be about ownership, interests seem to be about inheritance, interests seem to be, themes seems to center around the idea of love itself. Here, on the other hand, you have a major historical event of 1984 as the premise itself. It's not just a background here, and we'll talk more about it, how the idea of love and politics get intermingled here in this novel, and how they keep fleeting from one chapter to another in the narrative form of itself. So you will have a reimagination of that domestic fiction into a romance which is a kind of a political romance in that way, that like these are two people who are in public limelight. One is an investigating journalist, another is a news reader. So both the people are in public, unlike Austen's fiction, where the women were not so much in public, were not so much public figures in that sense. Here, Devjani, the protagonist, is a public figure. Everyone knows her. People send her letters. She's seen by the nation itself, and Dylan is also influential and quite a celebrated reporter. So some of those key assumptions about the fiction of Jane Austen get remade, rearranged, reimagined here. History is present as a very important agent here. 1984 riots loom large over the entire novel itself, and you also, along with that, we have also questions of liberalization, questions of media and its manipulation by those in power, and uh, how power and corruption go on to characterize post-independence India in that way. So you have those grand themes that probably make space into Rushdie or Ghosh or a Roy, but you also have the theme of love triumphing over everything. Here, misjudgments, misdeeds do not end in deaths of people. Rather, 1984 is used as a site for bonding, for love, and site of misunderstanding also. So you have a very different assumption and reworking of the reworking of a English classic into a canonical, into a popular work of Indian English fiction. That is one of the major things that that Anuja Chauhan does, and the other themes that come to be prominent in the novel are how vernacularization of English happens, how love and politics come to be intersected, and then we also see certain kind of discussions on the themes of masculinity. What kind of masculinity is desirable, what kind of masculinity or what kind of feminine agency is to be aspired for or prioritized. So all those discourses are there. Within those discourses, we also get to see the diversity of India, whereby we have multiple communities. Dylan's parents belong to Mangalorean Christians and Rajasthani descent itself. So you have both those sides coming together, and we have the Thakurs of the Delhi itself. So you have multiple communities coming in, multiple dialects, multiple societies coming in, which again shows you the diversity of it. So what we are talking about in terms of ideological heterogeneity, we get to see it in terms of the kind of spaces and the kind of people that populate Anuja Chauhan's work.